Okay. Oh, good.
Okay. Oh, and there's our first attendee. Okay, let me share my screen. Here we go. I'll just wait till exactly 1 and then we'll let everybody in all at once. But if anybody is joining us live, welcome. Live via LinkedIn. Okay.
And YouTube.
And YouTube, right. We're just expanding across all the horizons. Alexis, you'll be famous by the end of this.
Or infamous, one or the other, right?
All right. Gonna give it a couple more seconds. There we go. Okay, I'll let those in the waiting room in and we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Leanne. Good to see you. Thanks for joining today. I know we had a lot of registrants, but it's been that hit or miss time of year where I think a lot of people are still on summer break. So we'll see how many folks actually turn out today. But nonetheless, we will forge through and be sure to send out the recording to everybody who did register. We're also streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube for the first time this year. So that's really exciting as well. So we may have some viewers joining us from there also. But this is our third annual Critic ImpactEd Week. And today we are in our last session of the week with our wonderful guest speaker, Alexis Thompson. And we're going to be talking about developing future-ready thinkers in the age of instant answers. So Alexis is going to be coming in later on to share a lot of her experiences with using our tools. But before we do that, we'll start with just some introductions. So my name is Kelly. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Critic. I've been here about 5 years now, and in my time here, I've seen pretty much everything. Sky's the limit when it comes to Critic, is what I like to say. Anything from calculus, problem sets, chemistry, all the way through to research papers and English essays. So really anything can be done with our tools that you're going to see today. But what my role really is to make sure that instructors and students are set up for success with our tools. And so making sure everybody's aware of all the features and functionality that comes along with that and providing support through our wonderful team here. But I'll pass it over to Alexis to just introduce herself.
Oh, hi. Well, my name is Alexis Thompson, and I am on the faculty in the Department of Psychology, a clinical assistant professor there, and have been a clinical assistant professor since about 2019. So I am getting used to it, and I've been using Critic since about the same time. So it's been an interesting journey for me here.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you with us today, Alexis. Thanks for joining. Okay, so a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We are going to do a little welcome and introduction. We'll also speak about the changing role of higher education, it's really at a pivotal moment. I was reading some articles even just last night about things that are changing across Canada and the US in terms of post-secondary education and skills gaps that we're seeing widening from students coming from high school. So there's just all kinds of challenges. And now we add AI into the mix of that, of course. So we're going to talk about designing learning experiences for deeper thinking, which is where Alexis is going to come in and share a little bit about what she's been doing. And then also building future-ready skills through authentic assessment. So what does that actually look like? How do we ensure that students are employable and that they are learning the skills that they're going to take with them into their careers later on? And how can we make sure that we're assessing that in an authentic way? And then Alexis will also share what she's learned through the years in terms of what works and what doesn't, and some great insights that she has on that, and really how her teaching has evolved to from just having our one platform for peer assessment and trying lots of different activity types through there, now to this fall trying our new tool, Visible AI, for authorship tracking as well, and combining that with the peer assessment experience. And then at the end, we'll do our Q&A and have a little reflection, discussion, situation at the end. So if you have questions as we go, feel free to type them in the chat and one of my colleagues will respond. We have Devanshi on the call here from our marketing team, and she's happy to help you out if you do have any questions as we go. But otherwise, there will be that discussion period at the end, so you can also feel free to unmute at that point and we will have a larger discussion. So we'll start with just some introductions. If you are attending and you could just share quickly in the chat what your school and program is, like what are you teaching if you're an instructor? And then in one word or phrase, what's the biggest challenge you're facing with providing feedback to students today? And so some of you are using Critics. I would love to hear, your perspective. And if you're new to this kind of assessment, what have you been struggling with? What's been a challenge in terms of providing students feedback? So try to sum it up in one word or phrase, which I know is maybe a big ask, but would love to see where everyone is coming from. So give everyone a second to just kind of write something there. Alexis mentioned she's at Buffalo, and I am actually in Toronto. So we are not too far from each other. All right, I'll give it another second as people think about what they want to say. Yes, right across the border. I drive through Buffalo all the time on the way to visit my best friend who lives in Corning, New York.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. I'm not sure if people are typing or, oh, we got a response. There we go. Okay. University of Michigan, biggest struggle is time. Absolutely, Ruth. Yeah, definitely hear you on that. Lexus is nodding her head in exasperation. Yeah, time is definitely a key factor when providing feedback for sure. And then we have from Kennesaw State University, teaching real analysis with Critic this semester. First time. Welcome, Dhruva. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Nice to have you. And Leanne, I know you, longtime Critic user, also teaching mostly freshmen. Yeah, and especially I bet there's challenges in writing classes as well. Interesting. Okay, great. And then Natalia, an ESL teacher. And yes, I know you were in our session yesterday too. So nice to see you again. Great to have you. Okay, awesome. Great to have you all with us today. Nice to learn a little bit about where everyone's coming from. And so just wanted to get the wheels turning with a couple of stats, little quotes here. So the first one saying nearly 70% of students using generative AI worry they are not learning or retaining as much knowledge. So there are so many students, as we know, that are using Gen AI now. It really seems to be the thing that everyone is going to, no matter what. I know I have a daughter who is 14 years old, about to enter high school, and she's already entered the world of AI, which is a little bit crazy. And so, there is a lot of unknowns out there, and I think, it is like we were saying, this pivotal moment for education where we really want students to feel confident that they are learning the material at hand and that they are able to retain that, especially as they enter a workforce. And so, yeah, AI is playing a huge role in that. And then if we want students to learn, we have to design assessments that require them to do the things we want them to learn. So that's an interesting way of framing it from, of course, famous David Wiley. Just thinking about getting more to the practical side of things, really talking about making meaningful learning experiences where the students are going to be more hands-on, more interactive, and that kind of thing. And so that is what kind of Critic is all about, and I'll speak about that a little bit later. So in terms of the changing role of higher education, We are right now in this age of instant answers. AI has completely changed how students are accessing information. It is really at their fingertips. The knowledge is increasingly abundant. It is out there and it is available. And you kind of have to synthesize it and figure out what you're going to do with all of it. And the competitive advantage in school is no longer memorization. You can't just get by with memorizing things anymore. You really need to understand how to navigate different technologies. You need to just be able to get, even deeper in many cases in terms of the content that you're learning, so that it's not just memorized and it is kind of absorbed. Education must also emphasize thinking over information retrieval. So it kind of ties into that last one where, we want the students to be we want to be teaching students how to think and not, what to think or just learning information at the surface level. And detection tools, which we know are rampant out there. I know, Turnitin was like immediately on it. We're like, we got to detect it. And then there was all these false positives, and it created some tension over, how we're going to handle this crisis, and how we're going to approach AI from an institutional level, and really created a lot of mistrust. So we here at Critic actually recently had an executive offsite, and part of what we were talking about is how one of the biggest challenges facing post-secondary education is trust between students and instructors, trust between instructors and administration. And it's taken, years in many cases. Many institutions now, 3 years later, are finally coming out with AI policies, formed these committees and, all of these things that we know there's a lot of red tape involved with. So just kind of wanting to bring things back to a place where there can be that trust achieved again. Um, and ethical informed use of AI actually fosters responsibility and learning. So when students are using it properly, when they're knowing how to use prompts in a way that's going to get them the material or the information they want, and when they're able to discern if that information is accurate or not, or is achieving their purpose or not, that is where it can actually add a little bit of value. So the skills that are mattering most, and at the top three there, I always call them the three C's that Critic for sure directly addresses, and that is critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. Critic as a company was founded on this belief that critical thinking skills should be, improved in young people. That is what we are all about. That's the heart behind everything we do here. That's what our co-founders believed very heavily in when they founded our tool. And then, it's kind of evolved to be able to help students practice all of these professional soft skills, as we call them, that they're going to take with them that are becoming increasingly more valuable than just memorizing material. So learning how to communicate to others, learning how to communicate in a way that they're going to be receptive to, learning how to make sure that you're giving feedback in a way that the person is going to be able to implement and it's actually going to be high quality and give them specific reference points. Collaborating and being able to work as part of a team is a big one as well. So group work is another big thing that's coming up more, and live presentations and oral assessments and these kinds of things. And then also helping students, work on developing judgment and decision-making skills. I think that's really where that AI stuff comes in, right? When they're looking at the responses that the AI is giving them, being able to use their judgment and make decisions about whether or not the information is relevant, reflecting and metacognition as well, and then adaptability to just changing, ever evolving times. We're preparing students now for a world we don't know what it's going to look like in even, 3, 4, 5 years from now, which seems pretty close. But things are just changing on a rapid scale that we've not really seen before with this advancement of AI. So that's leading to this shift in the instructor's role. And that's really going from just delivering information and, the typical more authoritarian lecturing figure at the front of the classroom to designing meaningful learning experiences that are going to take the students a lot deeper into the material that they're learning. And creating opportunities for them to practice that. So really giving them just kind of practical ways that they can do that. So also facilitating discussion and reflection. I have helped many professors move discussion boards into Kritik, where it really helps give students a much more focused way to go through a discussion kind of process. And being able to reflect on their own work is another huge one as well. So understanding how they fit into the cog of the class, and where they are in terms of how well they're doing, or maybe they're doing better than they thought. Maybe they need to pull their socks up a little bit. So really reflecting on that. And as I said already before, helping students learn how to think, not just what to think. So getting into how to design learning experiences for deeper thinking. And I'm going to pass it over to Alexis now to speak about what has changed in her approach over the years.
Well, I think we can say that one thing has changed is that I am much more focused on deeper thinking now. That's a pretty recent evolution that kind of goes along with this, obvious change in secondary education that's coming, I'm sorry, in college education that's coming quickly, that our role has changed. We can't simply deliver information. We have to now have more specific learning experiences there's some suggestion that the major advantage to going to college will be deeper learning as opposed to simply collect, that's like having someone collect all of the memorizable information for you. And so I want to just put it out there that I didn't start with the idea of getting deeper learning. I started with the idea that I needed something to test my freshman Psych 101 students with that wasn't a multiple choice test. In the face of an increasingly diverse population of Psych 101 students that had different skills and different abilities, I wanted a way to make sure that I was actually collecting information on what they learned. Because I had a feeling that many students just simply weren't prepared to take the kind of multiple choice questions that I was giving them, and that they had learned something and just wasn't assessing it. And so I first started using Kritik for that purpose, because my Psych 101 classes typically have 400 to 500 students. And short of a multiple choice test, I mean, even a fill in the blank test is almost impossible to grade quickly in that class. And the peer review process allowed a phenomenon where I could do more of group assessment as opposed to individual assessment to give them feedback. And so I sort of started there. And I started in 2020 and ran right in the fall, and then ran right into the pandemic. And during that first semester, where we had like half a semester at home, and then I also had the opportunity to teach in the summer that semester, I got feedback from students that suggested that what they missed most was talking to their peers. And so in talking to their peers, what they actually missed was, besides just friendship and socialization, was that these were the people they studied with. And so in the fall of that first year of the pandemic, I used Kritik now for a completely different reason, just to really give them a sense of their peers, who, since everyone felt very isolated, and an opportunity to seemingly work together. Although this just was, they could see what their peers were writing, they could write comments to them, etc. And I thought it was interesting that year I saw better evaluations, or let's say longer evaluations. And so I was quite pleased with using it that way. And after a couple of years of that, I started to apply it in my upper level research methods classes, because for the same reason, that I wanted them to work together in groups, and that I realized that this social union that occurs in group work could be facilitated by the use of Kritik. And that's been also very successful to me. And I feel like it applies to the real world, because increasingly we all have to work in groups, including scientists who, for many years got to work by themselves. Honestly, it was very nice. And now we have to work in big groups. And then most recently this year, I've moved into the notion that Kritik may offer a product that can actually deal with the AI problem in a much better way than our current strategy of using a variety of different tools to look for the infraction of using generative AI. And I'm very excited about that. And I'm very hopeful that this actually does give them an opportunity, so instead of using it now to try to assess them in different ways, I still have that available to me using Kritik. But now I'm going to give them an opportunity to see how they should use generative AI, and to see for themselves when they're using it in a way that's going to be deemed unacceptable. And so I'm very excited about that. So my approach has changed as my needs have changed. I realized after thinking about this slide that I only use it for myself to help my needs in these situations of a really big class. But that I do think that in the end, it does help students a lot. And I think now with this advantage of their newer program regarding AI does get into this issue of deep thinking and trying to deep learning and trying to support that.
Right. I remember, I also think your class size has increased over time, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Exponentially.
Yeah, somehow when the word online got accepted into the university, the idea of capped your class changed and just became, well, how many people will go, basically.
Yeah, quite large classes you have now. So yeah, thinking about what makes students think, what can you tell us about that, Alexis?
Yeah, so again, this is a newer area for me to think about it, but I guess at that point when I decided to use it as a social motivator, I was thinking about what makes kids think, and being compared to your peers most definitely makes it a more personal objective for them, and I think that does increase their motivation. I think that being able to give a broader set of examples, or even to individualize samples, which you can sort of do in Kritik, and individualize the tasks they all have in some way so that it brings in something of specific interest to them. So in not in Psych 101, but in some of my smaller big classes, they work in small groups, and then each group has their own topic, and then their Kritik project is written so that they have to write on their topic, but it's a general purpose for each group, right? So it gives you a lot of individuality. Typically, they choose their own topic. We hope they like it. I think that when we think about what makes students think, I think giving them some scenario, which is evokes this kind of cognitive dissonance. They know they need to learn it, but it's something they don't like, or it goes against what they think is right. Often is a way to get students encouraged into thinking. I have a great example about that in Psych 101. We often use Kritik to moderate more or less a debate that we have in class with 500. Oh, I guess this is not in Psych 101. This was in my 121 class. But that class has about 150 students, and we break into 3 groups and we debate. It's a drug addiction class, so we debate whether or not, right now we debate whether hallucinogens should be legalized. Previously, we debated if marijuana had to be legalized. And students would get so mad when they got randomly assigned to the no, it shouldn't be legalized group. It was kind of funny. They would come in wearing costumes, dressed up like, a leaf, marijuana leaf, and something like that, in order to protest. And it would always come to me and say, so unfair, I want to be in the other group. And I said, why? I said, now you're going to learn so much more because you're in the group you don't follow. So just learn that. And I said, then come back and tell me how bad it was. And they always came back and said, well, they learned a lot. They actually have different ideas now about legalizing marijuana and the circumstance in which it should happen. And it was always so exciting for me to see those transitions. And I think that's a great example of how cognitive dissonance, at least from a psychology perspective, works. I also think that giving these more open-ended kind of questions, and there's a variety of different ways using this software that would be difficult with a multiple choice test, of asking them something that really has no clear answer, and asking them to justify their answer, and that provokes deep thinking. And then finally, of course, any sort of free recall. It's one thing that you can do a lot with multiple choice tests. I believe that strongly, but you can't ever do free recall, right? Because the question itself gives them lots of cues. And so you can, with this sort of platform, you can design something that can be free recall. It's a very subjective, non-cued recall, and then you don't get burdened by 450 essays that you have to read. Instead, the students get some peer feedback, which I think is important for them. I think that's also helping them think deeply when they look at what their peers are doing. And then I can give more of a summary of what the whole class has done and give them tips as to how to improve and how not to improve under that circumstance. I
Awesome.
think I got them.
Yeah.
And so again, maybe I've said this now, that why does it matter? Peer feedback matter? Well, because it's a fabulous motivator. First of all, it allows a student to get an idea of what their peers are concerned about, and they want.
Oh, Alexis, can you hear us?
Or different, they are. It encourages reflection of the motivation that comes from for having to interact with peers. And it also offers strategy of developing presentation skills where you're not getting feedback from the expert, the best case scenario. You're getting feedback from the middle of the group, which maybe gives you a more realistic view of how you'll be interpreted in the future. And I think that students can and do provide constructive feedback, but I do think this is something that we can teach them to do better. We can teach them how to, or help them learn or figure out on their own how to communicate in a way that doesn't hurt people's feelings necessarily, but gets the point across. And in my view, looking at small group work, this is a critical skill that they don't do well. And as a result, then they mope around about how either they're not getting an opportunity to do something or they're doing all the work because they haven't learned how to reach out and say, look, I need you to do a little bit more. Or, wow, I don't want to hog everything. What do you want to do? And say it in some way that can be well understood. And so I think this development of constructive feedback from your peer is important. Actually, obviously, it improves communication skills and peers have this motivational element. I think in the next slide, or maybe I say it later on, but it seems appropriate now, is just to say that, in life, we mainly interact with our peers. Whereas the one point that we don't is in school, where we're always interacting with some sort of expert, right? Or somebody who's got the standard down, and we're comparing ourselves to the standard instead of comparing ourselves to the peers, which is what we're really going to be challenged with once we get out to the real world.
That's a great way of thinking about it. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so building future-ready skills through authentic assessment. So am I speaking? I think I'm speaking here. Sorry, Alexis, I thought you were still going.
Oh, sorry. I don't know how I became muted. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I think this is me, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so I think I was just ending up to say that this becomes an authentic strategy because you're talking to your peers who you're going to be talking with. And college students are competitive, sometimes hard to eke that out in a public forum from them, but they will become competitive as the group work improves, their competitiveness improves. They see it as a challenge and they largely like to have some challenges. They just can't be as you know, extreme challenges. They need to be more moderate in size and increase along that way. And so in that sense, the critic process allows for sort of authentic assessment. It also allows for this scenario where you have multiple solutions, which is quite common in reality, but impossible to assess at least using multiple choice tests, and is less discussed in class for time reasons. You might be able to give an example of two different solutions to the same problem, but you don't have really enough time, typically, at least in my large survey classes, to talk about all the different possible outcomes. I think another important way in which this becomes authentic assessment is that it relies on nonlinear thinking, or it can rely on nonlinear thinking, which is more atypical, but increasing in importance as we become better at harnessing knowledge. That includes our development of AI, but also the development of statistical methods to harness larger amounts of information. We can actually extract information that's pertinent, predictable, and reliable from nonlinear thinking. And I think that students, because of their interaction with computers at a young age now and video games and all of those things, they have, in a lot of ways, are more open to nonlinear thinking than we are, because the kind of education I had, was a long time ago, was very linear in its structure. So I think that this improves or provides a way for students to express their nonlinear ideas that they already have, and maybe quite impressive if we could get them to express them, right? And as noted here, it's authentic because they have to justify what they think. It provides a way for them to justify what they think. I was just working on a new class project in Kritik, and what I decided, largely because of the discussions I had had in preparation of this presentation, that I'm going to make it a set of multiple choice questions where they have to justify the answer they choose to get. And then their peers can tell them whether they think it got it right or not. The peers can be given the answers, and then they can help the creator kind of understand whether they agreed or disagreed, or whether they thought it was a reasonable or non-reasonable argument. I think that'll be a great assessment, I hope. And I think it lets students, it's authentic because it lets students focus more on the process rather than on the product, which can't hurt, right? And that it might help to address the ethical side of using the variety of new tools that are available for cheating, let's just say, that go beyond the use of AI to write your papers to the use of glasses to go through your notes while you're taking the exam. Just we have regular workshops on what students are doing in in-person exams that are frightening to me at some level. And so I think that giving them ideas about the process and taking off the focus on the product will just naturally kind of reduce some of that pressure. And as I mentioned, it's and as Kelly often reminds me, students see this as a good lesson in time management. Because of the process of completing a Kritik assignment, you have to keep track of the due dates, and you just can't screw around with it or you're going to lose credit. And so as she had, and I've talked about that, students feel like it gives them a good lesson in time management, which again is going to be a good world school. I don't know about you, but my boss rarely lets me be late on anything.
Yeah, it's actually surprising how much that comes up in our student surveys. We have like a free text field where they could share what skill or, what they found the most valuable out of using the tool. And over again, you see students say it really helped me with my time management and organization. So, I mean, I guess that's an added bonus for sure.
So interesting because they're not very patient if you're late.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think I come back in here. So this is just kind of introducing Kritik for anyone who's not familiar with it, if you've never heard of it before or understand what we do here. So we are, a combination of a few different things, one of which is a peer evaluation platform that promotes active learning and deep reflection. The real thing that we're trying to do is emphasize feedback quality, not just making it a one-way street. So like, traditional peer assessment, if you've ever done it through other platforms or even in class manually, what ends up happening is that it's a one-way street. The student gives their submission to someone, they review it, and that's the end of that. But in Kritik, it comes full circle. And that is where they actually give feedback to the people who evaluate them to let them know how that evaluation landed with them. Did it resonate? Was it clear? Was it helpful? Was it motivational? And so that is what's helping them develop those professional communication skills. It also is scaffolding students through each step of the loop with the three-stage process. I've also seen Kritik used in many ways in a scaffolded approach where instructors will start with a few individual activities and then they build on those each time, moving up to a group activity they all have to work on together and then ending with a team member assessment. So that's a really great way to do kind of a scaffolded approach that you might not be able to do otherwise just because of the management of it all. It does, as we just said, encourage time management and discourage procrastination. And our surveys again say over and over again that 87% of students agree or strongly agree that participating in Kritik activities help them learn content better. So especially in content heavy courses, particularly like STEM courses or things where they just have to know a lot about different topics, going through this three-stage process on these different topics can really help solidify that understanding. So the basics of what we do for the peer assessment part of our product is this three-stage thing called create, evaluate, feedback. So create is where they actually create the work they're submitting. Evaluate, they anonymously evaluate their peers using a rubric provided by the instructor and then also leaving a written commentary. And then the feedback stage where they get to give that feedback back to their peer who evaluated them. And at that point, they don't see the scores or anything like that. They're only looking at that written commentary and finding out if it's valuable to them. The submissions are completely anonymized unless you're doing something like a live presentation where they, of course, have to see who they're evaluating. Otherwise, it is fully anonymous both ways. And then we also have our secret sauce, as I call it, our grading power, which helps with our grading accuracy. So students are assigned a grading power at the beginning of every semester. And as the system learns how well they evaluate their peer, that grading power can fluctuate. And what it does is it actually determines how much weight they're going to have on the grades they give their peers. So someone who has a higher grading power is going to have more of an influence on the grade their peer receives versus somebody who is still learning to be a good evaluator and might have a lower grading power. So it's actually a pretty complex topic, but that's kind of the high level overview of how it works. And activities can be completed individually or in groups. We have both options available. So that is Kritik. And then in practice, what does that actually look like? Well, the students are giving, receiving, and reflecting on their feedback. And it's really building a feedback culture while developing those professional skills. So one of the things I always like to say is, just in speaking to hundreds of professors through the years, one of the things I hear all the time is the magic happens. And I kid you not, that is the exact phrase. The magic happens when I open up the discussion in class to how things are going. What are you learning from this? What's been going well? What's not been going well? What have you liked to hear from your peers? What have you not liked to hear from your peers? What could your peers be saying better to you? You know, just taking 5 to 10 minutes of class time every few weeks to have a quick chat about how that's going really helps them have a better experience as well, and makes them feel like they are part of the process too, in terms of the, decision to use this in the class and that kind of thing. So it makes it more of a democracy. And it enables personalized and multidimensional learning. Just like Alexis was saying, it really allows them to have a much more ownership over their learning experience, where they're really expected to take that accountability. So what did this look like in Alexis's course? Well, I think it started with assignment design. So I'll let you explain how you designed those assignments, Alexis. Oh, you're on mute again. There we go.
So I always plan to give these projects about 2.5 weeks before the next exam, so that students have a period of time where they can be studying for the exam. But then the projects themselves are supposed to help tie together the information in that particular period. And so my assignment design sort of comes down to me picking some larger debatable point, or it can just be some complex concepts that we've discussed. I generally have at least two, on the premise that that way they can learn about one when they create it, and they can learn about the other when they're evaluating it, because you can assign a critic assignment so they evaluate whatever it is the topic they didn't create, so that they can learn two basic things. And I start by thinking, Critic provides a nice little template to use to kind of organize your assignment by suggesting what the objective is and then providing the instructions. I have long instructions that have gone from being very short instructions originally to now long instructions, largely I think due to the problem of AI. So in the last year and a half or 2 years, I would say, I now limit the resources they can use to create and think about what they're doing to our class notes, our class book, and then anything I give them in Critic. And I prohibit them using the internet to think about it, basically. And so if we see any signs of the internet, they get a 0. And we've used all the traditional methods trying to identify AI, essentially. And as Kelly suggested, that those traditional methods are very discouraging. It's not, they do not provide a lot of confidence that you're catching people that are using AI, or just simply good writers or students that have good skills. It's just, I of course suspect there are many false positives. But yet that's all we had, and so that's all we did. In preparing for this fall, I've noticed that my instructions have gotten shorter, and I think that is because I have less concern about it. I'm going to make it part of the project, basically. And as a scientist, I like that, because when you have a variable you can't control, you just make it part of the experiment, and it really makes things much more understandable. But I think that is a key. You have to somehow have a set of instructions where they can follow the concept changes, which are often difficult for them. I usually make them work over a week period. And, so that's 8 days. The first Monday of the week, their creation is due. And by Friday, their evaluations are due. And then the following Monday, their feedback is due. And so they can, because I've just learned that they can tolerate about a week-long project. And I give them about a week to read and think about the creation. And so for me, I think of it as a 2-week period. About a week early in the early part, they get the creation, they can think about it, they can work on it. And then once it's due, the whole project is done within the next 8 days. Then during that last few days before the exam, I provide some summary reports of what I noticed to be good or bad in the creations, the evaluations, and the feedback. I haven't done what Kelly talked about a few minutes ago, was to ask students to provide that sort of feedback. But that was a super interesting idea. And I may think about how you can do that with 400 people. That would be great if that's a possibility. So you can see that my role isn't, and obviously I do have a big role where I go in and take care of people who have suggested that they weren't graded fairly, et cetera. But even with 400 to 500 students, that turns out to never be more than about 10 to 20 students. And so it's not too difficult. The student outcomes are good. When I first started using it, I felt like they were maybe a little bit too positive or a little too high in their grading. Students do tend to favor themselves, and I can't blame them for that. And so I've accommodated the rubric a little bit to try and spread out their evaluations of their student peers to make it more common. I do indeed use their criterion system so that they can be theoretically compared against me. And that helps a little bit too, I think, in terms of student outcomes. But in general, it gives students who are not particularly good test takers an opportunity to shine. It does tend to support a more positive trend in the class than a more negative trend, which is typical of the multiple choice tests. And so students like it, basically. But you can't offer too much credit because, again, they do tend to be positively biased towards themselves to give people really unreasonably high grades. Like, in a class of 400 to 500, I've got probably 50 students who gave everybody 100. I asked them, I said, so it was perfect. Yeah, I'm not sure. It must be, it is perfect. Yeah, whatever. Nope, no way. I said, so the best one, yes. And if you just keep in with that conversation, they eventually break. But they do like to think about keeping it positive. And so you can't make it 100% of the class grade. You got to keep it down a little bit. That's what it looks like for me anyways.
Yeah, Alexis, you cut out there a little bit. I think we're having some delays in your audio. But I think we got the gist of it. I think you said out of 400 to 450 students, about 50 students were giving everybody 100%. And hopefully over the course of time, they learn that negatively impacts their own evaluation score with the way we have things set up. But our co-founder is actually looking at a way, so sneak peek, secret information here. We're looking at a way to provide instructors with a dashboard that would give you insight into exactly that so that you could, help manage that a little bit better or catch it earlier in the semester. And, we could provide you some tips on how to help with that. So that is something that we hope to have, at some point in the next year, but it's something we're just talking a lot about how we can surface a lot of the cool insights that we know exist from the tool better to our instructors that are using it. So very excited about that one.
Yeah, well, it's bad for ranking your class, having all these people say 100, but it does provide an opportunity for them to come to office hours and talk to me. And I think that more than not, I often think when they leave that they've never actually considered what it meant by giving 100, what they were saying about themselves, what they were saying about the person they gave the 100 to. And so I think it gives them a chance for a little deep thinking and reflection. And I often wondered if I went back, did they continue to do it that way, or I never actually had enough time to kind of reevaluate that. But I was hopeful.
Yeah, so that's hopefully something we'll be able to give insight into. And by the way, if anyone who uses Kritik is ever interested in that, we are able to pull information pretty easily from our databases. So you can always ask us for those kinds of insights and we can see what we can pull. So for example, how many students gave 100% in the first activity versus how many did that in the last activity. So if you're interested in seeing that information, let us know because we look at our co-founder does this research all the time into it. So we do have quite a bit of information we could give you.
As I mentioned, I tend to do in Psych 101, it's big class, I tend to do 3 2-week activities. They may or may not offer a multi-topic feature. I like the multi-topic feature, but I don't always use it. For example, in our last topic, no, I guess I use it there too. In our last topic, I asked them to evaluate their own attitude towards some topic that often carries prejudice in comparison to world data that they can see at this. If you're interested in psychology or sociology, you may be aware of this Harvard Attitude website where they let you evaluate your own attitude towards things using an implicit reaction time test. And they find that very interesting. But you can give it on a particular topic or you can give it on multiple topics as well. I guess it really wouldn't matter. I do like to adjust the scoring so that the project focuses mostly on evaluation. And that's because I think this is where they're learning the most, is during the evaluation phase. And so I put the highest amount of weight on that. Usually 50 to 60% of their grade comes from their evaluations, 10% from their feedback. And then whatever's left over would be 30% or 40% on the creation. I think that helps also because it reduces their stress regarding creation. Freshmen in particular are often very worried about their creations. And then they don't worry about the evaluation, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean they do a bad job at the evaluation. They just have less anxiety about it. And reducing the weight of the grade helps a little bit there. I do use the calibration activity. And for those who are familiar or not familiar, in the calibration, the students only do the evaluation and the feedback. And you provide the creation. And so I do this at the beginning of the semester, and it's very important that they understand that they've missed out on the creation, that somebody has done the creation for them so that they realize they're only doing half of the activity. And as I mentioned, we like to, the TAs and I try to take a look and provide some summary information to students. Kritik also provides evaluations like that, looking through the materials. And I'm not actually sure how they make those decisions, but by looking at it, I think they take it based on grades. They point out weaknesses and strengths. They tend to identify individuals who have done a good job. So you don't have their name, but they suggest you sort of advertise, here's a student who did a great job, and they provide you with materials to show that. And it's editable, so you can go in and agree or disagree with what Kritik found, basically, and use that in your class. That really expedites things quite a bit. I usually try to suggest how they can improve their work in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's our spotlighting feature. So that is a great way to ensure that everyone has access to learn from something that was done well. As you can imagine, in a peer review situation, sometimes students, if they're evaluating 3 of their peers in a class of 450, they may be assigned 3 poorly done creations that they have to grade. And so they never really get to learn from seeing something that was done well. So spotlighting can really make sure that it's equitable across everybody. They all get to see something that was at an exemplar level. So yeah, I love that you're using that. So you tell us how you introduce all of this to your students.
Well, I actually have quite a detailed account of the process and due dates and the syllabus. And then on our learning management system, I have a folder for the Kritik projects and give a kind of a detailed explanation of what they are, so that from the beginning of the semester, they kind of have an idea of what those projects are going to be. That same detail is also found in Kritik, but that's not available to them until about a week before the process begins. And I found that by giving them some heads up at the beginning of the semester, it helps to reduce the anxiety of students who are, high achieving type of students who really like to get everything done early. And in addition, it keeps reminding them that there's something there they have to think about, right? They keep on going back to see what they have to do this week, and that Kritik folder is still there and that sort of thing. I don't talk to them a lot in class unless a problem has developed. But I do give them a really detailed set of instructions in the Kritik. And then once the Kritik 2-week process happens, we have many, many reminders. Kritik provides reminders to them of the due dates. And then we talk about it for 5 minutes in class every time we meet during that 2-week period to remind people. And I send out final reminders of each due date as well. So they get bombarded. I've asked them if they feel like they get too many reminders, then nobody says yes. They all say, no, not enough. And I think, oh, okay. But to me, it does seem like we're reminding them kind of every day during that 2-week period. Either my TAs are reminding them, I'm reminding them, or Kritik is reminding them. Mm-hmm. And I think they need it because, again, they do seem to have a substantial number of students. I think that I regularly see that at the due date for the creation, 2 hours before it's due, I have 60% of the class, and that's it. And so in the past, I have a pretty long grace period, and I still am usually about 10% short at the end of that. And so there's many, many students waiting to the last second. And then that same percentage shows up at the evaluation. So by the time we see who got it done, I usually have out of 500, maybe as many as 50 students who have not somehow finished the whole thing and then gotten zeros, either entirely or for different portions of the process. And that's unfortunate, but that is life. That goes. They need to learn to be on time. So
That's
It's
true.
like 101 is one of the places they learn it the best.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely true. So here's an example of Alexis's instructions, which, as she said, have gotten lengthier over the years.
Yeah, so this is probably right for a set of instructions, and then usually there's another big paragraph about, so what happens if you use AI? What happens if you use somebody else from previous semester? What happens, all of which end with nothing very good for you happens. And but they learn that the signal is that all at once they'll get an email from me that they need to schedule a 30-minute appointment and show up, right, to avoid more dire problems. But hopefully now that we're looking at AI, there'll be fewer of those instances. I mean, if you think about their visual AI system, you would be deterred from using somebody else's essay because clearly they're being compared and watched. You'd be deterred at cutting and pasting something in, and so I feel like it's going to be significantly very useful to them because it's a great deterrent. But in addition to being a great deterrent, it's going to show them how to be more efficient and how to properly use AI. Like you at the very beginning said something so interesting to me, Kelly. You said that students report that they're afraid that they're not learning and retaining information. My experience with AI is completely opposite of that. I have finally tried some AI, like ChatGPT and Gemini and I are now close friends. But when I use Gemini on something that I know, I learn things very, very quickly and very, very fast. And not only just what Gemini says, I use all the links and I go back and I check and I go to from a different point of view to verify the information at a much, much faster rate than I ever could before. And so that is the true value in my mind of AI. So they're not having that experience. If we could figure out a way to give them that experience and really send the lesson of you need to become an expert at something. You need to have that expertise. And now AI really helps you out. But before that, it's kind of hit or miss, right?
Yeah,
So I thought that was
that's like what we were talking about in yesterday's session about computer science coding and how, when you're coding, the folks on our development team, they've been doing it for many years, and so they can use AI to help them write code very easily because they can quickly identify if the AI makes a mistake. But if you don't have those foundational skills, then it's not going to be very helpful to you because it might be producing some poor quality code that you're then releasing and is going to cause bugs and whatever else. So yeah, so I thought that was very interesting for sure. And I should just quickly explain Visible AI. I know we didn't explain that earlier, but that is our other tool that's newer for authorship tracking, which can be combined with peer assessment or used on its own. And Alexis is going to try it this fall in combination with the peer assessment. We call it the bundle. But the Visible AI actually allows students to have their authorship tracked. So the instructor can set parameters for how much AI generated content is permitted, how much pasted content is permitted, and then our AI assistant is actually built right into the tool. So you have full visibility into what prompts the students are using, how they're using it, whether they're inserting the text or not, whether they're revising the text. All of that is completely tracked. And so it gives you a lot of insights and again, just helps to establish that trust relationship between the instructor and the student because nobody's wondering how the assignment was actually created. So that's kind of that one in a nutshell and gives you a lot of just different data points as an instructor to kind of understand the assignment creation process. Oh yeah, and here's the two topics that Alexis uses. So our multi-topic feature will allow you to assign up to 26 topics, one for every letter of the alphabet. Although most instructors are doing two or three, and then have the students evaluate the opposite topic than the one that they created for. So it can be really helpful to still assess learning on both topics, but one through creation of work and one through evaluation of work. Anything to add there, Alexis?
Yeah. Um,
Perfect.
I guess this is I'll say about this rubric is that Kritik offers a large number of rubrics for different type of tasks. And in general, I found them very useful. I typically start with one of their templates and then I modify the definitions to my satisfaction. One thing I did, though, add to most of my rubrics is this rating scale, which in this example, I make them rate the top two evaluations they had, or and in this case, they were only having three to evaluate. or if they had 5, I'd give them 4 spots, and sort of encourage them to rank it first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And this was what I did to try and see if I could spread out the distribution of scores a little bit. And it has worked, not perfect, but it's worked some. And students have also then commented that it was helpful for them to read them all, rate them, and then go back and score everybody. Because it made them think about how they were different, in addition to thinking about just whether or not they made the mark. And so they felt like it increased their written evaluation of each evaluation that they did. Helped pretty well. And then you mentioned that not everybody does this. I give them, some small amount of weight for whether or not they actually presented on the topic they were supposed to present on, or did they present somebody else's topic? Sometimes they get confused. Other times they're just borrowing somebody else's work, or something like that. I would say these last two, here it says 5 and 5. I generally keep the weight of these pretty low, because what I'm really trying to focus in is the content and the thinking. But these are just, sort of some smaller things that you can do to try to keep everybody on the straight and narrow.
Right. Yeah, I love that rating. I remember just, meeting as we were meeting to prepare for this session and learning that you were doing that. I'm going to start suggesting that to other instructors. I think it's such a unique way of doing it.
Well, they like it in the end. They don't like it at the beginning. I think it's
Well,
unfair.
that's the case with a lot of things, right? It's like, over time, they suddenly come around, they understand. But if you just did one activity, it would fly over their heads probably.
And they don't talk to me a lot about if they got a bad rating, but I kind of suspect that if they didn't get a top rating, it made them think to work harder the next time, because
Yeah,
they want to have a top rating.
Yeah. For sure. And then this is just our scoring breakdown page. So these percents are fully editable by instructors. And you can see here, Alexis has edited the evaluate stage to be weighted the highest out of the 3 stages. So by default, we typically do a 50-40-10, and she's got a 40-50-10. So placing more emphasis on the evaluations. And I think we see many instructors first adopting Kritik with those defaults, because we do know that they work quite well. But then over time, as you get more comfortable with the platform and you understand, what exactly you want to achieve in your particular course with your particular students, that's where editing these can really make sense and help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with the tool like this. All right, so this is an example of an evaluation that a student gave. So you can see the student that they were evaluating generally did quite well, but there was some nuance in the scores that they were giving. So they didn't just get hundreds across the board, which is good. And you can see that students are generally pretty good at giving robust feedback to their peers. So imagine getting not just one of these, but 3, 4, 5 of these on your work. Like, that's going to give you a pretty well-rounded idea of how you did, and give you some ideas of where you did well and where you could improve. And so I think when I meet with instructors the first time they're adopting Kritik, one of the biggest hesitations is like, you mean I'm actually going to I trust my students to do this? Again, coming back to the trust thing, right? But they are capable of it. If you try it and you give them, good tips and tricks, and you keep that conversation open, they actually are very capable of being good evaluators. So Alexis, I don't know if you have anything to add on that thought.
No, that said very well. Thank you.
And then this one is meant to show the feedback. This is on from the same, so that this is the person responding to that evaluation comment. So they've used the sliding scales and indicated that they really liked that written commentary. They gave it a 4 for both motivational and critical. And then they left a comment saying, I love how you were able to see the clarity in my thoughts, which is what I wanted from the start. I also take the criticism because reading it over, I see how some sentences are longer and repetitive, which could have been avoided. So it does help them kind of reflect back on it. And again, just doesn't let them, have a one-way street. It has to go both ways. So, yeah. Okay, so quickly running through lessons from the classroom in terms of what worked and what doesn't. What was surprising to you, Alexis, and what were some of the challenges you encountered?
Well, I'm always shocked that there's so many that can't seem to get on time at all, right? That is always shocking to me. And I think other than that, I have one thing I've noticed is that I often have a set of students that are very strong students. They are A students, they're good students, but their evaluations are cruel. the best way to describe it. They're not wrong, and they're not necessarily stated in an emotionally charged way, but it's hard not to interpret them highly negatively. And then what happens is those students tend to get a bad grade because they're so different than everybody else in the class. And this is one of the ways in which the peer evaluation grades are being managed. And so I catch it and I have to go back in and kind of correct it and then have a nice long talk with the student about the problem here, because they think they're just right and everybody else is wrong. But you have to sort of explain, well, part of the problem here is how you lived in society and how you actually communicated that information to the person. And maybe you need to adjust that a little bit so that you can meet this social requirement as well. And so that to me was, I didn't really think I'd have to do much of that, but indeed, there's always a few every semester. The challenges are technical. Even though Kritik makes it super easy to do all of these things, I think it's going to be even easier now because you're going to provide the Word document they have to work in. But prior to this, I've had to deal with all kinds of documents coming off different kinds of computers and iPads that some mesh, some don't mesh. They mesh with Kritik, but then other students on their computer can't open it. Or, as I mentioned in our meetings, Google Doc is not my friend basically ever, because for some reason it always seems to be locked for students. And that's a challenge that's been hard to encounter. I have run sessions where we had students videotape themselves. That was also very challenging to get them to some sort of level of education about videotaping things in order to do the task. And I was surprised by that. I thought they'd be more competent at computers than they actually are. So that's one thing to keep in mind. As I mentioned at the beginning, my reason for using Kritik has changed over the years, depending on how education has changed. And I wanted to mention that what's been interesting to me lately is that you guys tend to be just ahead of us, right? So I think I came to the
Alexis,
said,
can you
yeah, I'm
hear?
not sure about next year. These AI problems are driving me crazy. And you said, oh, the way of teaching AI, which is probably in the beginning. And but I think you'll find it interesting. I'm so sorry. I can see my internet is acting again.
Yeah, you cut out there. The last thing I think we heard was that you said Kritik. I think you were saying Kritik was ahead of where you were as an
Yes.
instructor.
Yeah, I told the story that I had approached people early this spring that I didn't know about next year for 101 because the AI issue was making me nuts. I had so many students I had to meet with to discuss how they were doing their essays. And I think I met with Vlad and he said, oh, well, why don't you use visible AI? I'm like, what? And explained it and thought, wow, yeah, that does solve my problem. So you guys are in front of me.
Yes, we hear that a lot. It seems to be solving a lot of issues. So hopefully it does the same for you. Great. So a few just kind of key takeaways from our session. I know we're right at time here. Just prioritize thinking over answers, designing activities that require students to analyze, evaluate, justify, really get to the top of Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, which is what our logo is based off of. But creating opportunities for reflection, that really allows students to consider different perspectives and see how they fit into the grander scheme of things. Using authentic assessment, so getting into ways that are just more real world and open-ended tasks so that they are building the skills that will be needed once they enter the workforce. Leveraging peer learning where you can, of course, something like what Kritik offers can be really great at honing those specific skills, and then preparing the students for that AI-enabled future, which, part of it is the future, but we're already in it, aren't we? And so the goal is not really to compete with AI, but help students learn how to use it effectively and responsibly so that they're developing those judgment and creativity and reasoning skills as well. So if anyone is able to kind of stick around, we'll open it up to Q&A. I did have a little discussion question here just to get the wheels spinning. But as AI continues to change how students learn, what is one skill or habit of mind that you want your students to develop that technology cannot replace? But if you have any other kind of questions or comments, oh, sorry, this is well, this will be emailed out to you, but there's some resources there. But was going to open it up. Oh, we usually have a Q&A slide. Sorry, I guess we don't here. But was going to open it up to Q&A. So for anyone who has any questions for Alexis or for myself, happy to answer them before we go. Feel free to unmute. You're welcome to use the chat as well, but I know it takes a little longer to type it out and I don't want to miss anyone's questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to unmute. I'll give it a couple seconds.
I guess I could address the one that asked, what do you want them to, what do we still have to teach them other than AI?
Yeah.
I think that in some ways, everything. I think that we have to, I think that AI won't be successful at teaching good critical thinking skills, really. That will still be in our realm, but that also we have to somehow get them to understand that it's not okay to have an external memory for things. It has to be an internal memory, because this is how you develop creativity in a society, basically. That we can't all be coming from the same dictionary, right? We have to be coming from a variety of places based on our experiences rather than simply based on AI.
Yeah, for sure. And Hannah just said that in the chat. Hi, Hannah. Nice to see you. I don't know if you feel comfortable unmuting, but I would love to hear more about what your challenges are with students' critical thinking, and I love how you said critical consumer skills. That's a different one. All right. Maybe she's somewhere she can't unmute. That's okay. Oh, you're in the open office. No problem. No problem at all. But yeah, it sounds like we're very aligned. And that is exactly what, hopefully we are aiming to do here. So I know we're over time. I don't see any other people unmuting or anything like that. So we'll call it here. But thank you so much for joining us, Alexis. So thankful to have your experience and expertise sharing everything you've learned. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today and taken time out of their summers to be here. Even if you're catching the recording, we appreciate that. And if you have questions, don't be shy to reach out and let me or anyone on the Kritik team know. Okay, thank you.